Roberto Machado was the most feared billionaire at São Paulo's most expensive restaurant. Every Thursday, he turned waitresses into targets of his cruel game. "You can't even bring water properly," he'd say with an icy smile. That night, his chosen victim was a humble woman on her first day of work. Nobody imagined the explosive secret she carried. And when the truth came to light before São Paulo's elite, the silence was deafening. Thursday arrived with its usual ritual at Magnifique, São Paulo's most expensive and exclusive restaurant. Mahogany tables gleamed under crystal chandeliers. The main dining room held only 22 tables. Getting a reservation there was nearly impossible. Magnifique wasn't just a restaurant. It was a stage where million-dollar deals were closed between courses, where São Paulo's elite gathered to see and be seen. And every Thursday, punctually at 8 in the evening, Roberto Machado walked through those doors. Roberto wasn't an ordinary client. He was the client, owner of one of the country's largest construction companies. 52 years old, perfectly styled grey hair, custom Italian suits. His name appeared on billboards throughout the city. His face graced the covers of business magazines. But Roberto had a sadistic hobby. He humiliated waitresses. It wasn't explicit. He didn't yell or curse. His cruelty was refined, calculated. It started with endless questions about the menu, then came impossible requests, wines that didn't exist, absurd temperatures. And when the waitress tried to help, he'd roll his eyes, make comments about the staff's incompetence. The worst part was the smile, that corner-of-mouth smile when he saw nervousness take over. For Roberto, this was entertainment, a game where he always won. The waitresses at Magnifique knew the ritual well. When Thursday arrived, a collective unease took over the dining room. They exchanged glances, prayed not to be assigned to Roberto's table. Whoever served Roberto Machado left their shift crying in the locker room. Julia knew this better than anyone. 10 years at the restaurant, she'd watched 15 waitresses quit because of him, and every time, manager Paulo did the same thing. Nothing. "Look, it's Roberto Machado," Paulo would say with reverence mixed with fear. "He spends more here in 1 month than 10 clients combined. We can't contradict him." Julia hated that phrase, but she needed the job. So she swallowed hard and kept working. That particular Thursday, Magnifique had something new, a new waitress. Adriana was 30 years old, black skin, hair pulled back in an impeccable bun, eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. She'd arrived on Monday, didn't talk much, observed, paid attention to every detail. Julia liked her immediately. There was something different about Adriana, a silent confidence, a way of carrying herself that didn't seem like someone starting a new job. When Roberto Machado walked through Magnifique's doors at 8 o'clock sharp, Paulo nearly had an attack when he realized Adriana was assigned to the billionaire's table. "Julia, switch with her," Paulo hissed desperately. "The girl is new. She can't handle Roberto on her first Thursday." But Adriana had heard. She turned calmly. "No need to switch, mister." "Paulo, I can handle it." "Girl, you don't understand. He's cruel on purpose." "Difficult clients exist everywhere. I can take it." Julia tried to intervene. "Adriana, he's going to humiliate you, make you feel small, and Paulo won't defend you." Adriana looked at Paulo, then at Julia. Then she smiled, a strange smile, as if she knew something they didn't. "It's okay. I accept the challenge." Roberto Machado settled into his usual table by the window, where he could see the illuminated Paulista Avenue. He picked up the menu without looking at who brought it. "Good evening, Mr. Machado. My name is Adriana, and I'll have the pleasure of serving you today." The voice was firm, clear, without tremor. Roberto looked up from the menu. He expected to see nervousness, trembling hands. But Adriana met his gaze with absolute tranquility. "Interesting. First time I've seen you here," he said in the tone of someone evaluating merchandise. "First week, actually. Started Monday." "Ah, a novice." The smile began to form. "So you don't know anything about the menu yet, I imagine." I know the basics, but if you have any questions, I'll get the correct information for you, sir. Roberto blinked. She'd avoided the first trap, didn't pretend to know, wasn't arrogant, was honest. And what wine would you recommend to accompany the rack of lamb? Depends on how you like your lamb, sir. Rare or medium? Medium. And do you prefer fuller-bodied wines or something smoother? Roberto frowned. She was asking questions back. Full-bodied. Then I suggest the Argentine Cabernet Sauvignon, but the sommelier can make a better suggestion if you prefer something more specific. Again, she dodged the trap, offered a basic suggestion, and acknowledged the limits of her own knowledge. Roberto began to get irritated. The game wasn't going as planned. Bring the lamb medium and the wine you suggested. Smashed potatoes as a side. Perfect, sir. Adriana wrote everything down, and before leaving, she did something completely unexpected. Mr. Machado, may I ask a question? What? I read in a magazine that you're building a new mall in the South Zone. Is it true? Roberto blinked twice. No one had ever asked about his business. The waitresses trembled, obeyed, fled. But ask about his projects. Yes, it's true. Why? Just curious. Must be an immense project. It's the largest mall in Latin America. 320 stores. Roberto's chest automatically puffed out. He couldn't resist talking about his own achievements. Wow, 320. Adriana seemed impressed. Must take a lot of work to coordinate all that. You have no idea. 17 subcontracted companies, over 1,000 workers, suppliers from 20 different states. Impressive. I'll get your order, Mr. Machado. Adriana left. Roberto sat staring at where she'd disappeared. Something was wrong, or very right. For the first time in years, a waitress hadn't been shaken, hadn't trembled, hadn't given him the pleasure of humiliation. Worse, she turned the game around, asked questions, showed interest, and Roberto, like a vain peacock, had started showing off. Julia watched from afar, mouth open. Paolo sweated cold behind the counter. When Adriana returned with the wine, Roberto was different, no longer predator but curious. You like architecture? He asked as she poured the wine. I like things well done, and construction is an art, isn't it? Putting up something that will last decades. Roberto smiled, a genuine smile this time. Exactly. People don't understand that. They think it's just cement and bricks, but it's legacy, it's history. Right, Adriana finished pouring. Your lamb will be ready in 15 minutes, Mr. Machado. She stepped away. Roberto picked up the glass, swirled the wine, brought it to his nose, tasted. It was perfect. For the first time in a long time, Roberto Machado spent a Thursday at Magnifique without humiliating anyone. But this was far from the end of the story. In fact, it was only the beginning of a much larger game. A game Roberto didn't even suspect was starting, and that he was already losing. The following week passed slowly for Roberto Machado. Endless meetings, contracts, negotiations, but something different pulsed in the back of his mind. That waitress, Adriana, she hadn't trembled, hadn't bowed, had asked questions. And worse, he'd answered, opened up, showed off like a teenager wanting to impress someone. This bothered and intrigued him simultaneously. The next Thursday, Roberto entered Magnifique with a different posture, more confident, more determined. Today, he would test whether that waitress's calm was real or beginner's luck. Paolo saw Roberto arrive and his stomach churned. He looked at Adriana's section. She was straightening a table, calm as always. Adriana, Paolo called softly. He's back. I know, Mr. Paolo, everything's fine. Are you sure? I can assign Julia today. No need, I'll take care of him. Julia approached, worried. Adriana, last week was the first time. He was evaluating you. Today he'll press harder, try to destabilize you for real. Adriana smiled that enigmatic way. Let him try. Roberto settled into the same table, opened the menu with calculated movements. When Adriana approached, he didn't even look up. Good evening, Mr. Machado. What a pleasure to see you again. Bring still water, cold, but not with ice, and the bread needs to be warm, not hot. The voice was cold, distant. He was testing. Perfect. I'll be right back. Adriana returned in 2 minutes. The water was the exact temperature, the bread warm in the basket. Roberto tasted the water, touched the bread. Perfect. He frowned slightly. I want the mushroom risotto, but I want the chef to use less butter than normal. And the cheese has to be aged Parmesan, not the regular kind. I'll pass the exact instructions to the kitchen, sir. And for starter, I want the carpaccio, but the meat needs to be room temperature, not cold, and I want extra capers. Noted. Roberto expected to see nervousness, a sign of pressure, but Adriana just wrote efficiently. Then she did it again. The question. Mr. Machado, how's the mall project? Has construction started? Roberto blinked. She'd remembered. And more, she was demonstrating continuity, real interest. We started last Monday. The foundation is being prepared. Must be exciting to see something so big coming off paper. It is. Roberto found himself relaxing. Most people don't understand the complexity. They think it's just hiring workers and that's it. But there's all the licensing part, right? Permits, approvals. Roberto got animated. She was touching on a point he loved to talk about. Exactly. 8 months just for approvals. City Hall, Fire Department, Environment, an infernal bureaucracy. 8 months? Wow. But you managed it, didn't you? You must have good contacts at City Hall. The phrase was innocent, curious. But Roberto, inflated by the attention, started talking too much. I do. The Undersecretary of Public Works is a personal friend. We play golf every month. He facilitated the process quite a bit. How lucky to have those connections. Must help a lot in the business world. It does. Roberto lowered his voice, as if sharing an important secret. Half the big deals in this city depend on relationships. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Makes sense. I'll put your order in with the kitchen, Mr. Machado. Adriana stepped away. Roberto stared at his water glass. He'd just told a waitress about his political connections. Why? Because she managed to make him talk. In the kitchen, Adriana relayed the order. Julia was beside her, witnessing everything. You're making him talk? Julia whispered, impressed. How do you do it? Arrogant people love talking about themselves. You just give them space and pretend admiration. But why are you doing this? Are you planning something? Adriana smiled but didn't answer. When she returned with the carpaccio, Roberto was more at ease. His posture had changed. He was no longer in attack mode. He was in exhibition mode. Adriana, this mall is going to change the entire South Zone. It'll generate 5,000 jobs. 5,000? That's incredible, Mr. Machado. And the landscaping project will have rare species. It'll be a landmark in the city. You must be very proud. I am. Roberto cut a piece of carpaccio. This is my 13th mall, but this will be my greatest legacy. 13th? You're very successful. Adriana had said this with genuine admiration, or at least it seemed genuine. And Roberto, like a peacock, opened his feathers wider and wider. Throughout the meal he talked about supplier contracts, logistical challenges, how much he'd invested in the project, tight deadlines, meetings with investors. And Adriana listened, asked sharp questions, questions that made Roberto want to explain more, detail more, impress more. Julia watched from a distance, not understanding. Paolo was confused. What was happening? Why wasn't Roberto playing his cruel game as usual? When Roberto finished dessert, he was expansive, satisfied. He'd spent 2 hours talking about himself to an attentive audience. Adriana, you're different from the others. Thank you, Mr. Machado. Most people aren't interested in business. You have curiosity. That's rare. I find it fascinating how things work behind the scenes. Roberto took the bill, left a generous tip, 50% of the total. Next week I'm coming back and I want you to serve me again. It will be a pleasure, sir. Roberto left the restaurant feeling important, recognized, superior. He didn't realize he'd just handed over valuable information, details about contracts, names of people, questionable political connections, investment amounts, deadlines. He didn't realize he was being studied. When Roberto disappeared through the door, Julia ran to Adriana. "What was that?" "What? You made him talk for 2 hours. He didn't humiliate anyone today. He was happy." Adriana straightened the tables in her section, calm. "People like him need audiences. I just gave him the stage he wanted." "But why? What's your objective?" Adriana looked at Julia. Her eyes had a different gleam, calculating, intelligent. "You'll understand soon, Julia. Just trust me." Paolo approached, still processing what he'd seen. "Adriana, Roberto left a 500 real tip for you. That's never happened. He normally barely leaves 10%. People value those who listen to them, Mr. Paolo. But how did you manage?" "It's simple. Just pay attention. Everyone wants to feel important." Paolo shook his head, not understanding. Adriana grabbed her bag from the locker. Time to go home. But before leaving, she did something strange. She took out her phone and opened a notes app. Started typing quickly. "Undersecretary of Public Works. Personal friend, plays golf monthly, facilitated approvals, 8-month process, total investment not yet revealed, supplier contracts, awaiting more details." Julia saw over her shoulder. "Adriana, are you writing down everything he said?" Adriana locked her phone and smiled. "Good night, Julia. See you Monday." And she left. Julia stood in the middle of the restaurant with a chill down her spine. Something was happening, something much bigger than she could understand, and Roberto Machado, in the comfort of his penthouse, poured himself an expensive whiskey and smiled at his own reflection in the glass. He'd loved that curious waitress. Finally, someone who recognized his greatness. Little did he know he'd just handed over the first pieces of a puzzle that would soon turn against him. The third Thursday arrived with different energy at Magnifique. Adriana was in the locker room adjusting her uniform. Julia rushed in. "He just arrived, and he's with a group of important businessmen, powerful people." "How many?" "6, all men in expensive suits. I recognize 2. One's a city councillor, the other owns a hotel chain." Adriana nodded, calm as always. "So today's the day. He'll really want to show off." "Adriana, I don't know what you're planning, but be careful. When he has an audience, he's worse." "I know. That's why today will be different." Julia didn't understand, but didn't have time to ask. Paolo appeared in the doorway, sweating. "Adriana, Roberto asked for you specifically. He told people you're the best waitress in the restaurant." A discreet smile appeared on Adriana's face. "I'm going." When Adriana approached the table, she immediately felt the change. Roberto was different, taller, more imposing. He had an audience. "Now, gentlemen, this is Adriana," I mentioned, "the only waitress here who understands business." The men looked at Adriana with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. One of them, the councillor, smiled at the corner of his mouth. "Roberto always exaggerates. A waitress who understands business." "This one does," Roberto insisted. "Adriana, tell them what we talked about last week about the mall." Adriana understood the game. He wanted to use her as a trophy, an example of his own influence. "Mr. Machado told me about the big project in the South Zone, 320 stores. Impressive." Roberto turned to his colleagues triumphantly. "Even she recognizes the magnitude of the project." The businessmen laughed. It wasn't malicious, but had a tone of superiority, as if it were funny for a waitress to understand business. "Well, let's order already," said the hotel owner. "I have a meeting at 10. Adriana took the orders, all complex, all with specific requirements. She wrote everything with precision, without hesitating. When she finished, Roberto signaled for her to approach. "Adriana, bring the most expensive wine in the house. Today is a celebration." "Celebration of what, Mr. Machado?" Roberto leaned in, smiling. His voice was loud, intentional. He wanted everyone to hear. City Hall approved my proposal for the convention center. 500 million in investment. The mayor signs Monday. The businessman clapped discreetly. Adriana kept her expression neutral. Congratulations, Mr. Machado. Must be very gratifying. It's the biggest contract of my career. And you know the best part? He looked at his colleagues. It came through waiver of bidding. All resolved quickly. The councillor gave a nervous laugh. Roberto, you shouldn't say these things so openly. Why not? Roberto was euphoric. Everything's legalized. City Hall chose the best company. Simple as that. Adriana noticed something important. Roberto was drunk on power, and when people get like that, they talk too much. I'll get the wine, gentlemen. In the kitchen, Julia was waiting. Well, he just told me about a 500 million contract direct, no bidding. Julia's eyes widened. That's illegal, isn't it? Depends, but it's questionable at minimum. Adriana grabbed the most expensive bottle of wine, and he just said it in front of 6 witnesses. When Adriana returned to the table, the mood had changed. The businessmen were more relaxed. Alcohol was starting to take effect, and Roberto was at the center, as always, bragging. Adriana began pouring the wine calmly, attentively, listening to everything. The undersecretary is my compadre, Roberto was saying. I baptized his youngest son. We have an agreement. I handle the projects, he handles the paperwork. The hotel owner laughed uncomfortably. Roberto, you're drinking too much. These things aren't said out loud. Oh, come on. Everyone here knows how it works. You all do the same thing. Awkward silence. Adriana finished pouring the wine. She was about to leave when Roberto grabbed her wrist. It wasn't aggressive, but it was invasive. Wait, Adriana, bring me more bread. Of course, sir. She tried to pull free, but Roberto held the grip for another second. The other men looked down without intervening. When Adriana returned with the bread, things got worse. Roberto was visibly altered, voice louder, gestures wider. He grabbed the bottle of red wine and, gesturing exaggeratedly, knocked over half a glass onto the white tablecloth. The red liquid spread across the table. For a second, there was silence. Then Roberto looked at Adriana, and something changed in his eyes. The mask of sympathy fell. You didn't place the glass in the right position, he said loudly. That's why I knocked it over. Adriana blinked. Mr. Machado, the glass was in standard position. Are you contradicting me? His voice went ice cold. You, a waitress, are telling me I'm wrong. The businessman tensed. Some looked away. I was just explaining. You don't explain anything. Roberto stood up. You spilled the wine. You're not qualified for this table. I want you removed now. The entire restaurant went silent. All the clients looked. Adriana stood in the center of the room with all eyes on her. Paulo came running, pale. Mr. Machado, what happened? This waitress is a disaster. Spilled wine on the table, argued with me, and now she's making me look like an idiot in front of my guests. But, sir, I want her out of here now. Paulo looked at Adriana, then at Roberto. The choice was obvious. Roberto spent more in 1 month than 20 employees cost. Adriana, please go to my office. We'll talk after the shift. It was a veiled dismissal. Everyone knew. Julia stepped forward, revolted. Mr. Paulo, this isn't fair. She didn't do anything. Julia, don't get involved. Roberto stood, chest puffed out, looking at Adriana with contempt. The game had changed. He'd returned to his old habit, humiliate, dominate, win. Adriana looked at him. There were no tears in her eyes, no fear. There was something different, something Roberto couldn't identify. Calm, absolute control. It's okay, Mr. Machado, she said quietly. You're right. Roberto smiled victoriously. Finally, learn some humility. Adriana nodded, took off her apron, folded it carefully, placed it on the side table. But before leaving, she asked one last question. Her voice low, almost a whisper, but echoing through the silent dining room. Mr. Machado, This 500 million contract with City Hall, are you sure everything's legal? Roberto froze. The businessman froze. The entire restaurant froze. What did you say? Nothing, sir. Just curious. Good night. And Adriana left the dining room, back straight, head held high, while Roberto stood there with a strange premonition growing in his chest. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Adriana didn't go to Paolo's office. She went straight to the locker room, changed from her uniform into normal clothes, jeans, black blouse, sneakers, grabbed her bag and left through the back door. Julia ran after her. Adriana, wait. Where are you going? Home, Julia. But Paolo said to wait. I don't work here anymore. I don't need to wait for anything. Julia grabbed her arm, anguished. This is so unfair. You didn't do anything wrong. Roberto spilled the wine. Adriana turned and looked at Julia. There was something different in her eyes, something Julia couldn't decipher. Julia, do you trust me? Of course. Then trust that all this has a purpose. What purpose? You were humiliated in front of everyone. You were fired. Adriana smiled, a small smile but full of meaning. I wasn't fired. I finished my work. What? Adriana, you're not making sense. It will make sense soon. Adriana squeezed Julia's hand. You're a good person, Julia. Keep being one. And next Thursday, don't miss work. Why? What's going to happen? But Adriana was already descending the stairs. Julia stood there, confused and worried. Meanwhile, in the restaurant's dining room, Roberto tried to regain composure, but the businessmen were uncomfortable. The scene had been unpleasant. Roberto, you were very harsh with the girl, the counselor said quietly. She deserved it. Incompetence isn't tolerated. But she was just doing her job. Look, I'm not going to discuss this. Roberto refilled his glass. Let's talk business. But the mood had changed. The celebration had died. 15 minutes later, the businessmen began inventing excuses to leave. Roberto sat alone at the table, looking at the wine stain on the tablecloth, thinking about that last question Adriana had asked. This 500 million contract, are you sure everything's legal? Why had she asked that? What did she know? Or better, what had she discovered? Roberto shook his head. Nonsense. She was just a waitress. An unemployed waitress now. She couldn't do anything, but the discomfort didn't pass. The next morning, Roberto woke late, grabbed his phone. 17 unread messages, all from last night's business group. He opened the group. The first message was from the hotel owner. Roberto, be careful what you say in public. You drank too much yesterday. The second was from the counselor. That thing about the direct contract, are you sure it won't be a problem? The third was from another businessman. You humiliating that waitress was unnecessary. It looked bad. Roberto locked his phone, irritated. What a bunch of weaklings. Since when did businessmen care about waitresses? But the seed of doubt had been planted. During the weekend, Roberto tried to focus on other things. Played golf, dined with his wife at another restaurant, went to an art gallery opening. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw Adriana's face, that calm, that control, that last question. On Monday morning, Roberto was in his office when his lawyer called. Roberto, we need to talk. About what? About the City Hall contract. An anonymous complaint arrived questioning the process. Roberto's blood ran cold. What? Someone reported possible irregularities in the process, questioning the direct contract without bidding. But everything's regularized. Technically, yes. But now they're going to investigate, review everything, and if they find any questionable detail, the contract can be suspended. Roberto hung up with trembling hands. Who had made that complaint? Who? The answer came like lightning. Adriana. It couldn't be coincidence. He'd talked about the contract Thursday. Friday, she was fired. Monday, the complaint appeared. But how? How would a waitress have access to the public ministry? How would she know the right channels? How? Unless she wasn't just a waitress. Roberto grabbed the phone, called Paolo. Paolo, that waitress I had fired Thursday, Adriana, I want her resume, now. Mr. Machado, I can't give out employee data. Now, Paolo, or would you prefer I never set foot in Magnifique again? Silence. Then, I'll see what I can do. 20 minutes later, Paolo called back. Mr. Machado, there's something strange. What? Her resume is very vague, little information, and the reference contacts she gave. None answer. What do you mean, none answer? The numbers don't exist. I tried calling and they all come back as non-existent. Roberto felt a chill run up his spine. Anything else? Yes. She asked to receive payment by transfer, not cash. And the bank is a business account, not personal. Business account from what company? It doesn't say the name on the registration, but it's a CNPJ, not CPF. Roberto hung up. Stood in the middle of the office, processing. Adriana wasn't a normal waitress, maybe had never really been a waitress. She'd infiltrated Magnifique, made him talk, collected information, waited for the right moment, and he'd handed over everything on a platter. All the details about the mall, the names of political contacts, the undersecretary, the backroom agreement, the direct contract with City Hall, values, deadlines, everything. He talked, thinking he was impressing a simple, curious waitress, but he was confessing to someone who knew exactly what to ask, who knew where to touch, who knew how to make him lower his guard. Roberto sat in his chair, dazed. Who was Adriana? The phone rang. It was the Undersecretary of Public Works. Roberto, did you talk to anyone about our agreement? What? No. Why? Because internal audit just called me. They want to know about facilitating project approvals. They cited your name. Roberto closed his eyes. The castle was crumbling, piece by piece. Did someone hear you talking, Roberto? Did someone record you or report you? Now we're all under investigation. The call dropped. Roberto sat alone in the office. The silence was heavy, oppressive. For the first time in decades, Roberto Machado felt small. He'd underestimated someone, treated them as inferior, publicly humiliated them, and now he was paying the price. The question that wouldn't stop: what else had Adriana planned? And more importantly, who was she really? The following Thursday, Roberto didn't go to Magnifique. For the first time in years, he broke the ritual. But Adriana was there, and she wasn't wearing a uniform. Thursday, 8 o'clock at night. Magnifique was different, fuller than normal. Julia noticed when she arrived for her shift, all tables reserved, and they weren't regular clients. They were important people, very important. She recognized faces from magazines, famous businessmen, a TV presenter, 2 judges, a high court judge. São Paulo's elite was there. Mr. Paolo, what's happening? Julia asked, confused. Paolo was nervous. More nervous than normal. I don't know. All these reservations were made yesterday, payment in advance, and there's a table reserved in the center of the dining room that nobody can touch. Reserved by whom? I don't know. The system just says special reservation. Julia felt a shiver. Something was going to happen. At 8:15, Magnifique's doors opened and Adriana entered. But it wasn't the uniformed Adriana, it was someone else. She wore an impeccable navy blue dress, business cut, elegant, high heels, hair loose in perfect waves, discreet but striking makeup. And on her wrists, a watch Julia recognized from afar, a Patek Philippe, at least 100,000 reais. Adriana crossed the dining room as if she owned it, because she did. Julia dropped the tray she was holding. The sound echoed through the restaurant. Everyone looked. Paolo ran out of the office. Adriana, what are you doing here? You can't... Adriana interrupted him with a smile. Good evening, Paolo. Can we talk in your office? Or rather, in my office. Your office? Yes. I bought Magnifique. The deed was registered yesterday. I'm the new owner. The silence that fell on the restaurant was absolute. Clients stopped eating. Waiters stopped serving. Time froze. Julia stood mouth agape. Paolo was pale. The other waitresses looked on without understanding. "You bought the restaurant," Paolo stammered. "I did, paid in full, 3 million. The old owner was wanting to retire for months. I just facilitated the process." Paolo sat in a chair before fainting. Adriana continued, voice calm but firm. "In the last 3 weeks, I wasn't here as a waitress. I was conducting an evaluation of management, service, and especially how employees are treated." She looked at Julia. "And what I discovered about abusive clients who are permitted here," Julia began to understand. The questions, the calm, the strategy, everything had been planned. "But why?" Paolo asked, stunned. "Why disguise yourself as a waitress? Because nobody shows their true face to the owner, but to a waitress. Then you see who people really are." At that moment, Magnifique's doors opened again, and Roberto Machado entered. He hadn't come by choice. He'd received a mysterious invitation, an envelope delivered to his house. Inside, a simple card. "Attend Magnifique Thursday, 8 p.m. Urgent matter." Roberto entered thinking it was some setup, but when he saw the restaurant full of people he knew, influential people, he relaxed a bit. Then he saw Adriana in the center of the dining room, in a dress, with the posture of someone who commanded everything. His eyes widened. What's happening here?" Adriana turned to him, smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good evening, Mr. Machado. Good that you accepted the invitation." "What invitation? Who are you?" "My name is Adriana Costa. I'm a businesswoman. I work with restaurant management and corporate environment evaluation. Until yesterday, I owned a chain of 4 restaurants in São Paulo." She paused. "Today, I own 5, including this one." Roberto looked around. All eyes were on them. He felt sweat start to drip. You're the waitress?" "I disguised myself as a waitress for 3 weeks to evaluate this establishment." "Evaluate?" "Yes, and I discovered something interesting." Adriana took 2 steps toward him. "I discovered this restaurant tolerates abuse, tolerates clients humiliating employees, and I discovered a specific client who turns this into entertainment." The dining room was in absolute silence. Everyone listened, everyone watched. Roberto tried to laugh, but it came out forced. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Adriana took out her phone. "In the last 3 weeks, you served me 3 times. The first time you tried to destabilize me with questions. The second, you showed off and talked about questionable business. The third—" She paused. "The third, you spilled wine purposely and blamed me, demanded my dismissal, humiliated me in front of 6 businessmen." "You spilled the wine," Roberto responded, agitated. "We have internal records of what happened. I can present them now here in front of everyone if you prefer." Roberto paled. Adriana continued, "Implactentar novamente. You continuar editar continuacionable." "But the worst wasn't that. The worst was discovering you've been doing this for years, with dozens of waitresses, and that management is complicit because you spend a lot here." She turned to Paolo, who was hunched over. "Paolo, how many employees quit because of Mr. Machado in the last 2 years?" Paolo swallowed hard. I don't know the exact number." 12, Adriana answered. 12 women. Some cried so much they needed psychological counseling. One developed panic syndrome. The dining room was shocked. Some clients looked at Roberto with disgust. Roberto tried to defend himself. "That's a lie. You're making all this up." "I spoke with each one of them. I have testimonies. I have proof." Adriana took another step. "And now, Mr. Machado, as owner of this establishment, I'm going to do something that should have been done long ago." Silence. "You are permanently banned from Magnifique." "What?" "You are not welcome here. Not today, not ever again." Roberto exploded. You can't do this. I'm Roberto Machado. I know everyone in this city. I will destroy you. Go ahead. Adriana crossed her arms. Use your influence. Use your money. Use your political contacts. Oh, wait. She tilted her head. Your political contacts are being investigated now, aren't they? Because of that anonymous complaint about irregularities. Roberto's face turned red. It was you? It was the conscience of a citizen concerned about ethics in public contracts. Adriana smiled. But yes, it was me. Roberto took a threatening step toward her. 2 security guards immediately appeared, blocking him. I suggest you leave peacefully, Adriana pointed to the door. Or I formalize the report with all the documentation I have. Your choice. Roberto looked around. All the businessmen, judges, important people looked at him with contempt, with disgust. He'd been publicly unmasked in front of all of São Paulo's elite. You're going to pay for this, he hissed. No, Mr. Machado. Adriana delivered the final blow. You're the one who will pay for years of abuse, years of humiliation, for thinking money gives you the right to destroy people. Roberto left, staggering, humiliated, defeated. When the door closed behind him, the restaurant exploded in applause. Julia ran and hugged Adriana, crying, You did this for us, for all of us. I did, Adriana hugged back. Nobody deserves to be treated like that. São Paulo's elite stood and applauded. Justice had been done. The applause still echoed in Magnifique when Adriana asked for silence. She wasn't finished. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your presence, but before we continue with dinner, I need to clarify some things. São Paulo's elite settled again, curious, attentive. Adriana continued, I didn't do this for personal revenge. I did it for all the women who were humiliated here, for all who left crying, for all who lost their dignity because someone with money thought they could buy the right to mistreat. She looked at Paulo, who was hunched in a chair. Paulo, you've been manager here how long? 8 years, ma'am. 8 years. And in 8 years, how many times did you defend an employee being abused by Mr. Machado? Awkward silence. None. Adriana answered for him. Not once. Because he spent a lot. Because he was important. Because money was worth more than dignity. Paulo lowered his head, ashamed. I needed to keep the restaurant running. He was one of the biggest clients. And how many employees did you lose because of him? How many talented women left because they couldn't stand the toxic environment? Paulo didn't answer. Adriana turned to the clients present. Some of you witnessed scenes of abuse here. Some saw Mr. Machado humiliate waitresses and said nothing. Why? A businessman stood embarrassed. Because we didn't want to get involved. It wasn't our business. It wasn't your business. Adriana stared at him. When you see someone being humiliated in front of you and do nothing, you become complicit. The silence was heavy. A judge present raised her hand. Ms. Adriana, may I ask a question? Of course. Why did you choose to infiltrate as a waitress? Why not just buy the restaurant and change the rules? Adriana smiled. Because I needed to see the truth. When you're the owner, people treat you differently, respect you, flatter you. But when you're a waitress, you see who people really are. She paused. I grew up being a real waitress. I worked in restaurants since I was 15. I know what it's like to be treated as inferior, to endure abuse because you need the job, to cry in the locker room and come back smiling because you can't lose the work. Julia was crying silently. Other waitresses too. That's why I made sure to go through everything they go through, to feel it myself, so I never forget, and to guarantee that in my establishments this never happens again. New applause, stronger, more emotional. Adriana then turned to Paulo. Paulo, you'll continue as manager, but under new conditions. Paulo looked up, surprised. I will. Yes, because I believe in second chances. But you'll undergo training on humanized management, on employee protection, And if I learn of any case of abuse you ignore, you're fired immediately. Understood? Understood, ma'am. I swear I'll change. I hope so. Adriana picked up a folder from a nearby chair. Now about Mr. Roberto Machado. Some of you must be wondering, did she go too far? Did she exaggerate? The TV presenter raised her hand. I confess I was wondering. Banning him from the restaurant and also reporting his business. Isn't that too much? Adriana opened the folder, took out documents. These are copies of 12 testimonies from 12 women who worked here. I'll read excerpts, she began. Testimony 1. He made me repeat the order 5 times. The 5th time he said I didn't pay attention. I cried in the bathroom for half an hour. Heavy silence. Testimony 3. He spilled water on my uniform on purpose, then said I was improper to serve. I was sent home without pay for the day. Some women in the audience had tears in their eyes. Testimony 7. He called me incompetent in front of his family. My young son had a fever and I was worried. I quit the next day because I couldn't take it. Adriana closed the folder. So tell me, did I go too far or was I too lenient? Nobody answered. The judge stood and applauded, then the others, one by one, until the entire restaurant was standing again. Adriana breathed deeply. Part of the mission was accomplished. About the report to public authorities, she continued, I didn't invent anything. I only reported what he told me, his own words. The questionable contracts, the political facilitations, the backroom deals. The High Court judge present nodded. You did the right thing. If there are irregularities, they need to be investigated. Exactly, I'm not persecuting anyone. I'm just ensuring transparency. If he did nothing questionable, the investigation will conclude that. But everyone knew Roberto had talked too much, shown off too much, and now he was paying the price. Adriana then smiled, lighter. Now let's talk about the future. Magnifique is going to change. New rules, healthy work environment, total employee protection. She pointed at the waitresses. Any client who mistreats an employee will be warned once. The second time they'll be invited to leave. The third time they'll be permanently banned, no matter how much they spend here. The waitresses applauded emotionally. Salaries will be reviewed, tips will be distributed fairly, and we'll have an anonymous reporting channel for any problems. Paolo was writing everything down, serious. And lastly, Adriana looked at Julia. I'd like to promote Julia to service supervisor. She demonstrated loyalty, courage, and empathy, qualities I value. Julia let the tears fall freely, hugged Adriana tightly. Thank you. Thank you for everything. The clients at Magnifique that night witnessed something rare, justice being done. Not just punishment, but transformation. Not just revenge, but reconstruction. When dinner ended, several people approached Adriana. They wanted partnerships, wanted to know about her other restaurants, wanted to learn about humanized management. The story was already spreading. In a few hours, it would be in all of São Paulo elite's WhatsApp groups. In a few days, it would be on social media. In a week, it would be headlines. Businesswoman disguises herself as waitress and exposes abusive billionaire. Roberto Machado would wake the next day to a different world. A world where his name was tarnished, where his business friends avoided him, where invitations stopped coming, where doors began closing. It wasn't prison, wasn't bankruptcy, but it was something worse for someone like him. Social irrelevance, public humiliation, losing the respect he valued so much, tasting what he'd done to so many women for years. And Adriana, as she closed Magnifique that night, smiled satisfied. Justice had been done, but the story wasn't over yet. 3 weeks later, Roberto Machado sat alone in his office. The desk, once full of contracts, now had only scattered papers. The phone that rang constantly now stayed silent for hours. The City Hall contract had been suspended. The investigation found enough questionable details to review the agreement. 500 million at risk. The Undersecretary of Public Works was removed for investigations. 2 councillors were being investigated. And Roberto Machado's name was in all the headlines, not for his achievements, but for suspicions and reprehensible conduct. Business friends stopped calling. Event invitations dried up. The golf club delicately suggested he take temporary leave. But the worst wasn't that. The worst was people's looks on the streets, in elevators, in the few places he still frequented. A look of disgust, contempt from those who knew who he really was. His wife asked for divorce in the 2nd week. His adult children barely responded to messages. He'd lost money before, lost business, but he'd never lost respect. And now he understood that respect can't be bought. It's built and destroyed. Roberto picked up his phone, opened the browser, typed, "Magnifique restaurant." The news appeared. Magnifique restaurant under new management becomes model of healthy workplace. Businesswoman Adriana Costa transforms Magnifique and inspires changes in other establishments. Former Magnifique waitresses report, "Now we work with dignity." Roberto closed his phone. Felt something he hadn't felt in decades: shame. Meanwhile, at Magnifique, the transformation was visible. The environment was lighter, the waitresses smiled genuinely. Julia, now supervisor, coordinated the team with firmness and kindness. Paolo had changed, participated in training every week, learned to listen, protect, value. Adriana visited the restaurant 3 times a week, talked with the employees, asked about problems, listened to suggestions, implemented changes. And the clients adapted. Some complained initially about the new rules, but when they saw service improve, when they realized happy employees serve better, they understood. Magnifique was fuller than ever, not just for the meals, but for what it represented. A place where dignity was worth more than money, where respect was non-negotiable. One Thursday, exactly 1 month after the revelation, Julia was organizing the dining room when a special client entered. It was one of the former waitresses, the one who'd developed panic syndrome because of Roberto. "Julia," she called timidly. "Carla!" Julia ran to hug her. "How are you?" "Well, very well. I'm in therapy, and I came because I heard about the changes. Want to work here again?" Carla smiled but shook her head. "No, I don't want to work in restaurants anymore. But I came to thank her, to thank Miss Adriana for doing what nobody did for me." Adriana appeared at that moment. She'd heard everything. "Carla, right?" "Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for defending us, for showing that we deserved respect." Adriana hugged Carla. "You always deserved it. All of you always deserved it. I'm sorry it took so long for someone to do something." Carla cried. Julia cried. It was a healing cry, a cycle closing. That same week, Roberto received an unexpected call from an old mentor, a businessman he respected. "Roberto, we need to talk." They met at a discreet cafe. The mentor didn't waste time. "You lost everything. Money you can recover. But respect, reputation, that takes decades to rebuild." "I know." "Do you really? Because the way I see it, you still think you were wronged, that you were the victim of a setup." Roberto was going to contest, but stopped. The mentor continued. "You humiliated people for years, and when someone held you accountable, you played victim. That's not manly, that's cowardice." The words hurt, but they were true. "What do I do now?" Roberto asked, for the first time with genuine humility. "You own it. Own the mistake. Publicly apologize. Seek out the women you hurt and ask forgiveness. And start over from zero, without shortcuts, without backroom deals, with honest work. And if they don't forgive me, then you live with that. But at least you'll have tried to do the right thing." Roberto went home thinking, for the first time in decades, thinking not about how to earn more, but how to be better. 2 weeks later, an open letter was published in major newspapers. "My name is Roberto Machado, and I acted abusively. For years, I humiliated restaurant employees. I used my economic power as a shield. I treated people with contempt. I have no excuses, only responsibility. I publicly apologized to all the women I harmed, the 12 who worked at Magnifique and countless others elsewhere. I'm seeking professional help. I'm learning about empathy, respect, humanity. I don't expect forgiveness, but I own my failures. And I hope my story serves as a warning. Money doesn't give anyone the right to mistreat anyone. The letter went viral. Some found it insufficient, others found it courageous, but everyone recognized it was a first step. At Magnifique, Adriana read the letter. Julia asked, "Do you think he really changed?" "I don't know, but he finally owned it. And that's something." "Would you forgive him?" Adriana thought. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. He'll still carry the weight of what he did. But if he really changes, if he uses his story to educate other men not to do the same, then maybe something good comes from this. Julia smiled. "You're amazing, you know. I'm not. I just do what should be obvious, treat people with dignity." That night, Magnifique closed full. Satisfied clients, happy employees, a transformed environment. Adriana looked around before leaving. Saw Julia guiding a new waitress with patience. Saw Paolo checking that everyone had finished comfortably. Saw smiles, respect, dignity, mission accomplished. Because in the end, justice isn't just punishing those who err, it's transforming systems, protecting those who need it, ensuring stories of abuse don't repeat. And sometimes justice begins with a courageous woman, a simple disguise, and 3 weeks of strategic patience. Adriana left Magnifique with the certainty that she'd planted something greater than a successful restaurant. She'd planted hope, and hope, when well cared for, transforms the world. Those who plant humiliation reap shame. Those with dignity always win, and those who fight for others never fight alone. Power has limits. Money can buy tables, dishes, and expensive wines, but never dignity. Those who think humiliating others is entertainment discover sooner or later that the price is high. This story shows that respect is the only currency that never devalues.